You know, anytime you're feeling down about the world, just look at this poor little plant, just going for it, growing out of concrete, getting pissed on every day, trying to get its last remaining leaves into the sunlight. I'm gonna document it. Welcome back, Deep Review TV viewers. It's Chris Nichols here, and today we're playing with the Tamron 11-20mm F2.8 Di3-A RXD for APS-C. I've got it on my Sony a6400 here today that we're going to play with. A very nice ultra-wide lens that will complement the very popular 17-70, which we have already reviewed. I do want to apologize, though. Again, we got lots of forest fires all around Alberta, and again, it is a smoky, smoky day. So Jordan and I are going to have asthma attacks, and, you know, for tests, well, we'll just see what we can get. Now, the Tamron 11-20 RXD actually build quality-wise feels identical to all the other RXD lenses. Not exactly awe-inspiring construction, but I've never found them to be too sloppy or anything like that. They are certainly lightweight. This is only about 335 grams. That's a sixth of a Noct. So we're getting very, very nice lightweight little lens. I also do like that, like all the other RXD lenses, it's a 67mm filter thread. That makes a lot of sense, especially if you already have something like the 17-70 for your E-mount. And like the other RXDs, it's also weather resistant. You've got that nice rubber gasket around the lens mount and multiple seals inside the lens as well. So it's very consistent amongst their line. And the only thing I'm going to say here is it is a more expensive lens in the RXD lineup, probably because of its fast aperture and ultra wide nature. But for that price, it would have been nice to have an autofocus manual focus switch on here somewhere. I mean, that's not going to add a lot of weight. I'm sure they could find space, and that would be very useful to have on this lens. Now, there's no need for an image stabilizer switch because this lens is not image stabilized in any way. Now, you're going to be happy with the autofocus performance on the 11-20. It uses a stepping motor, but it's quiet, actually very fast. There's not a lot of glass for this lens to move, and so we're finding it very snappy, very quick. For an ultra-wide, I'm having no problems following and tracking things at the speed that I want. Now, when it comes to manual focus, and especially breathing for video work, there is some breathing. You can see here, we tested both ends of the focal range, and there's a little bit there in the corner, so I wouldn't say this lens is great for breathing and focus pulls, but certainly for quick autofocus and street shots, no problem. As usual, we like to look for chromatic aberrations in our samples, and first off, longitudinal chromatic aberration, where you get the autofocus areas having color fringing. That's basically non-existent. Very well controlled, which is good because that's hard to fix. As far as standard lateral chromatic aberrations, you know, color fringes and contrast areas, again, very well controlled, so no need to worry on this lens. Now, the Tamron 11-20 has a very compelling macro capability, at least on paper. You're getting about 1 to 4 life-size reproduction at 11mm, but your focusing minimum distance is under 6 inches. The lens itself with the hood's like 4.5 or so, so you're basically mashed up right against your subject. I'm blocking the subject with the camera, putting shade all over it. Now, closer to the 20mm focal range, I feel that macro is actually still quite usable. You're not going to get the same macro capability as you will at 11mm, but I do find that the field of focus is a little bit flatter, the corners look better, and so I would say this is still a very useful feature to have. You can see here that you can still get nice close-ups where you utilize the look of a wide angle and push that background far away, and I think I'd use it far more at that range. But still, hey, I mean, it's nice that the lens can focus extremely close at 11mm, and you might find some use cases where you might like the shots from that. I just want you to keep in mind the effects that will happen there. So it's important to know how an ultra-wide lens will perform when shooting towards the sun, because it happens a lot in architecture and landscape shots. And first off, I'm going to say flare, where you get that sort of loss of contrast, just kind of washed out look when there's a bright light source in the frame or just outside the frame. It actually controls that pretty well. Sunstars, though, not very beautiful. I mean, we often like to stop these down to tight apertures and make specular highlights grow into these beautiful sunstars. Here, the tines aren't thin and pretty like normal. They're just kind of messy and they blur around a little bit. But the other problem I'm having when shooting stop down to get sunstars is I'm actually getting a lot of ghosting. You can see it here in a lot of these examples. Big, colorful reflections in the corners of the shot, kind of hard to get rid of. All right, we're back to talk about the Tamron 11-20. Let's start with bokeh. Now, bokeh quality on the Tamron RXD lenses we've tested has kind of been a mixed bag. Sometimes very decent, sometimes in the case of the 17-70, less than optimal. And I'd say this is kind of somewhere in between. But let's give you guys some context here. So first off, looking at wide open specular highlights at 2.8, quite round, little busy though, like onion rings going on for sure, not very clean looking circles, not much cat's eye effect though. When you stop down the lens, because it's only a 7-blade diaphragm, you do see that kind of polygonal shape in your specular highlights. But I do want to keep this in context because first off, ultra-wide lenses and bokeh balls, I mean, it's not that often that happens. And even when it does, they're quite small and far off in the background typically. So it's just not that big a problem. What I do like is when you are doing shots where you've just got focus going from in focus to out of focus, or if you're doing close-ups where your background goes quite soft, it's actually a very nice looking transition. And I think that's far more important in an ultra-wide landscape kind of lens. Now, when it comes to sharpness, this particular sample of this lens is going to make my job very easy because this is actually some of the most consistent performance we've seen out of a lens, regardless of where you were in the zoom range. Let's take a look at our samples here. Now, at 11 millimeters, the widest possible, at 2.8 in the center, you can see it's still very sharp. When we stop down to 5.6, it really doesn't improve things that much. It's already really good wide open aperture. When we go to the corners here at 2.8, you can see the corners do go a little bit soft, but you're not getting strange corners where they smear or anything like that. Stopping down to 5.6 does help a little bit in the corners, but overall I was very impressed by how flat the field of focus is here. And that's nice if you're going to shoot things like murals or, you know, architecture, flat building faces and things like that. You get really consistent performance from center to corner. Now, when we go to our 20 millimeter range, it's basically identical. Our talk 2.8, you can see here, very good. When we stop down to 5.6, really not much of an improvement necessary. And then we go to the corner, shooting both at our widest aperture or stop down to 5.6, it's basically the same story. Very flat field of focus, very consistent performance. So I'd say, first off, you're gonna like this lens even if you're shooting at the widest range, even to the corners, and this is definitely a lens that you can shoot wide open very happily. So it looks like Tamron's made another excellent lens that's compact, rugged, and fairly affordable. The obvious competition here is going to be the Sony 10-18 F4, which is a great lens, and we've used that quite a bit on APS-C platforms. I do like that lens a lot, but it's slightly more expensive. It also has optical stabilization. That is a nice benefit, but more so if you were going to do video work, maybe some handheld low light work, but the fact of the matter is that ultra-wides aren't really where you desperately need optical stabilization. I'm using this on a 6400, no stabilizer whatsoever, and again, in pretty good light, I had no problems getting sharp pictures handheld. So I think this is a great choice for any photographer looking for an ultra-wide for APS-C cameras. So this lens is a great option for Sony users, but they're not the only ones that could potentially benefit from this particular lens. Tamron has now released the 18-300 for Fujifilm's XF mount, and we hope to see all of the other lenses come out for that as well. That would be really exciting. We'll have to cross our fingers, wait and see. Hopefully this helps you guys though decide if this lens is a good choice for your camera kit. Please let us know comments below. Of course, we have sample galleries on dpreview.com, links in the description below. Subscribe, we'd really appreciate that. Click that notification bell, and otherwise we'll see you guys soon.